This nation was founded on the principle that all men are created equal.
Who did this to us?
And that the rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened.
All of us as Americans should be troubled by these shootings.
As accomplished as I am, and a man of color, I am an American. I shouldn't have to be yes-sirring anybody. I have to do that because I don't want to be killed.
We must continue to delve deeper into the philosophy of nonviolent resistance.
When people say Black Lives Matter, that doesn't mean blue lives don't matter. This isn't a matter of us comparing the value of lives.
They know how to handle violence, but they proved over and over again that they don't know how to handle nonviolence.
Welcome to the special broadcast called One Voice. I'm Lisa Evers, your co-host, along with Ebro Darden. This is a special effort of 3 stations, WBLS, Hot 97, and WLIB, committed to bringing our community together.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're living in a very serious time. We all know why we've gathered here today, and we're gonna have some real conversation and hopefully find some real solutions, or at least attempt to lay out a plan to continue to have dialogue and continue to bring the community closer together and improve the relationship between ourselves and NYPD. And I know, you know, this is being streamed around the world right now. We're on 3 radio stations right now, so the world is watching. And hopefully we can have a productive conversation. That's our aim today.
And we want you to get involved in the conversation. You can tweet us using the hashtag OneVoice at Hot97, at WBLS, at WLIB, and let us know your questions and your comments. You can also call our hotline at 1-800-223-9797. And let's introduce our panel right now. Joining us from the de Blasio administration is the Community Affairs Unit Commissioner, Marco Carrion. Marco, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
We really appreciate it. Also with us is former NYPD Lieutenant and Criminal Justice Professor Dr. Darren Porcher. Darren, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure.
Mr. Carrion, Marco, can you talk to us, because I wanted to set this kind of tone. What systems do we have in place today? Because New York City's had a lot of problems with officers that the community feels has committed crimes, and a lot of officers that haven't done any time or seen any repercussions as far as we can tell, right? And that's a major problem. And we'll get into more of this later on, but I hear from a lot of people that just want to hear often when they know an officer has screwed up and made a mistake. Oftentimes we hear that a family's been paid millions of dollars, yet and still we never hear an apology, and I'm sorry, this was a mistake. So how are we improving that, and what systems do we have in place today?
You know, but how about if we save that for just a moment, because I think we have a special guest on the phone right now.
He's ready.
I think we're joined right now by Police Commissioner William Bratton. Commissioner, are you there? Commissioner Bratton, this is Lisa Evers and Ebro. Are you there?
Hi, Lisa. How are you? Good afternoon.
All right, good afternoon. And my co-host here is Ebro Darden of the Hot 97 Morning Show. Thank you so much for joining us, Commissioner.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity to be with you.
Commissioner Bratton, you know, the city's listening right now, and a special, particular audience is listening right now, which is the Black community here in New York City listening to this conversation. As you know firsthand, being commissioner of this wonderful city we live in, we've had some problems. I'd like to hear from you, and the city would like to hear from you. What systems do we have in place today to improve community relations between the people and NYPD?
Actually, quite a lot. Going back to the incident involving Mr. Garner in Staten Island, the chokehold incident, the Ferguson incident, we began a whole series of initiatives in the NYPD. My first deputy commissioner, Ben Tucker, my chief of department, did a listening tour very quickly. Chief of department came back and very quickly said, we need to do something that, listening to the minority communities of the city, the African American community, there are real issues with how our officers are interacting with them. So we have, in fact, been doing quite a lot. The mayor has committed phenomenal amounts of revenue, leadership in this issue, training that last year we put all of our personnel, 30-some-odd thousand officers, through 3 days of training dealing with issues of racial bias, new tactics, trying to address the issue of legitimacy in policing. The training cycle that will be starting in September is 3 additional days. One will be procedural justice, the second will be on de-escalation tactics, and the third is going to be on implicit bias. I fully recognize that everybody in America, no matter what your color, that we have implicit biases, and we need to take that into account. So in our training, we'll be seeking to do that. Over the last 2 years, I'd also point out, as crime has continued to go down in this city, with many fewer victims of shootings, historic lows, and murders, that we have what we call the peace dividend. There have been hundreds of thousands of fewer stop, question, and frisk incidents. That is under the supervision of a federal monitor that we agreed to. So far this year, I think we've had about 8,000 of them, with many more of those 8,000 leading to an actual arrest for a crime or an offense. We have reduced significantly summonses in terms of changes in our marijuana arrest policy. We have also recently, working with the City Council, that we have agreed to use civil enforcement as a first option rather than criminal enforcement over many of the so-called broken windows quality of life offenses, such as public urination, etc. And so we have in the city also the lowest number of police-involved shootings of any major department in America. New York Police last year had 33 combat situations with 36,000 police officers in which they actually engaged in shootings involving citizens. I think there were 8 deaths in this city as a result of that, many fewer than in many other cities of much smaller size. And also a good news factor here is that complaints to our citizen CCRB, a Citizen Complaint Review Board, are down. That board is being reconstituted. There's a lot of positives happening. We haven't been just sitting back, that we're attempting to address the fact that these issues matter, and we need to do something about it.
Commissioner, what about the composition of the police department racially and ethnically right now?
This morning I swore in 600 new police officers. 12% of those officers were African American. About 30% were Latino. We had the highest proportion of Asians ever, I think at around 13 or 14%. Almost 60% are residents of the city of New York. So they not only represent what the city looks like, that many of them are residents of this city. So they experience in their lives up to this point what other New Yorkers experience. We are about to embark on a new recruitment campaign, and hopefully that we'll be able to advertise extensively in the various minority communities, including the African American community, in which we believe that we can increase significantly the number of minorities in the department. We'll be appealing to the so-called millennial generation, the younger generation, that our average age of hiring is 25. And I'm very encouraged by the recruiting campaign that's being put together. It's interesting, one of the things that we're not having a problem with here in New York City, unlike many of my colleagues around the country, is recruitment. That young men and women are still very interested in joining this department. And we have totally changed the way we train them in the academy. And when they come out of the academy, we fully understand that we need to teach our officers to correct some of the problems of the past, to be more respectful, to be better trained on de-escalation of violence, to, as we will be attempting to do, deal with issues of implicit bias, prejudice, procedural justice. We're fortunate in this city that we have significant funds. We've got in the mayor somebody who certainly is committed to this, and I'd like to thank it myself and my leadership team, people who are committed to it. And it's reflected in the fact that this year we'll have had almost 1 million fewer law enforcement actions in this city, and the vast majority of the reduction is in the minority community.
Commissioner Bratton, one last question for you. Just because we have the world listening right now, definitely the country's listening to this conversation as we stream everywhere, and obviously New York City's listening. How can we as the community get a better understanding? You know, we see these videos where we feel like a police officer has clearly committed a crime. You know, it shakes out that that officer sees, well, to us, it seems like there's no consequences. The officer is not convicted, doesn't go to jail. How do you reconcile as the commissioner, and how can you articulate to the people listening right now what's really happening there? How come it is that for us as the public, we see someone die on camera and no one apologizes, no one takes accountability for a screw up? There's nothing.
Well, in looking at those issues that occur around the country, if I could relate to it first with an experience I had in Los Angeles. A community activist, African-American woman, Sweet Alice, in Watts, who I came to know over my 7 years as chief. As I was leaving after 7 years, that her and other community activists in that community, including John Mack, who headed up the Urban League for many years, who ended up as my boss as the head of the police commission, Sweet Alice said to me at an event that she hosted to wish me well as I returned to New York, she said, Chief Ratton, you know why we like you so much? And I said, oh, Sweet Alice, I know you've had my back for 7 years, but why? She says, because you see us. How powerful those words are, that you see us. And so I think what is necessary in America at this time is that we all try to see each other in a way to understand the motivations, to understand the biases and the prejudices that might have been formed. And in terms of these horrific events that are increasingly portrayed because of the videos that are out there now, police body cameras, incidents being photographed by witnesses and bystanders, that policing and community safety is a shared responsibility. We all have an obligation to try to find common ground. And one of the ways to find common ground is to first admit we have a problem, and we do. Nobody can deny that there was a problem at the time in America in relationships, police and the African-American community. But we have to find ways in which we can really make it known about how intense these feelings are. But even as we do that, find ways that we can talk with each other, much the same as the president attempted to yesterday. He had 3 hours of very, very, as best I understand it, confrontational conversation. But it was conversation. It was the idea of trying to see each other, trying to hear each other. And I'm a great believer in that. I try to put myself as best I can into the shoes, if you will, or the minds of the many diverse communities I have to interact with here in New York City.
And Commissioner, thank you very much for being with us for the special broadcast on One Voice. If you're just joining us, a joint effort of WBLS, Hot 97, and WLIB. We appreciate you being part of the conversation, and we look forward to working with you in the future, more conversations, and trying to improve relations between police and our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Bye-bye.
Right. Thank you.
Have a good
Thank
afternoon.
you, Commissioner.
So Commissioner, carry on. When you hear what the commissioner is saying, what is he not telling us also in terms of some of the steps that you've been taking through your unit and through the de Blasio administration?
As far as improving police-community relations?
Right.
Well, I think the biggest piece, I mean, just to expound on what the commissioner talked about, is not only the retraining, but the commitment to neighborhood policing. You know, the mayor and the police commissioner have committed to put more officers on the street who have been trained in de-escalation, but their directive is now to really become an integral part of what the community is, to get to know folks, to really be part of the fabric of the community. You know, community leaders, school kids, shopkeepers. I mean, so you have now police officers who run basketball leagues, who give out prom dresses, who throw parties.
Do softball games with their own DJ enough?
Exactly. And this is really about, as he said, seeing the community, right? So people know that they're seen and not just interacted with, that the police are part of the community.
You know, I mean, we're pressed for time, and I'm doing my best to be as in my problem-solving mode as possible and find solutions. But even in that response, which I appreciate the commissioner taking time to come on the program, you know, we're all simple people, and people are losing their lives, right? Sometimes you just want to hear someone who is in an authority position say, I'm sorry, we botched that, so-and-so screwed up. And I realize there's politics in that because—
And legalities,
legalities. If you admit guilt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's what
From a human standpoint.
From a human
Darren, what about that though?
All right, there's two
you,
sides
you
to
see so
this.
many.
No disrespect, Commissioner Carrion, I respect that you work for the de Blasio administration. However, when I listen to Police Commissioner Bratton, everything is great. We don't have any problems in connection with the minority community. The police department is doing everything to conjoin with the minority community. In reality, we have a major problem here. When I look at what's happening with Black Lives Matter, I may not be a proponent of the organization, but one thing that they did introduce, they introduced the narrative that there's a problem, and we now have a national discussion and connected with it. Now, when I look at the police department, I was a lieutenant in the Internal Affairs Bureau. I was a lieutenant in the Community Affairs Bureau. I trained recruits in the police academy. Is there a racist component in there? Absolutely. Is there an element of discrimination? Absolutely. This is also transferring to the public that we police. There are two significant areas that need to be changed in the police department.
For example?
Cultural and organizational. When I say cultural, you have a lot of police officers that have the perception of people in these communities as thugs, hoods, and lowlives. We need to change that culture and make these police officers understand that these citizens within these communities, we want to refer to them as customers, not thugs, lowlives, etc. In addition to that, the organizational structure needs to be changed. The way policing is set up is it's in two components. You have an order maintenance, which is primarily driven on enforcement. And then you have another component, which is the public servant piece. When you look at the exorbitant the amount of resources that go into policing, they focus on enforcement. Every time I watch television, crime is going down. We have this number of arrests, we're driving down homicides. But I've never once seen the police department quantitate their police-community relationships. So when I look at the order maintenance piece, we need to shift some of those dollars from order maintenance into the public servant that focuses more so on the police-community relationship. The executives in the police department have a complete, and I say a complete, disconnect with what happens on the street. Oftentimes, when we see things like this happen,
But
they
sent Commissioner Tucker, they sent Chief O'Neill around.
Every
to
time I watch
meetings?
television, I either see Police Commissioner Bratton, I see the Chief of Detectives, or I see the Chief of the Department. I'm not a racist, but I see three white guys. Ben Tucker is the first Deputy Commissioner. He's an African American. I don't see him in the forefront. I see what the rest of the city sees. They see a lack in diversity. Although the commissioner states that they're ramping it up, that's not what we see. Perception means everything. But going back to that public servant, we need to shift more funds into that police community engagement because the top is highly disconnected with what's happening on the street.
Well, we have the community affairs, the community affairs unit commissioner here. In terms of the community, what about what Darren is saying, that to make that a priority, and everybody knows in every organization, the boss sets the tone. They say, this is what our priorities are, this is what our culture represents. Is it time for police departments to understand it's not about the bigger guns, the bigger trucks, the bigger equipment, it's about relating to people, human relations?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would say a couple of things. Number one, I don't think any sane person would think that a year or two of reform is going to change the system, right? It took us a long point to get to the frayed relations that exist between the community and police, and it's going to take us time to get out of that. Now, in politics, we always say that your budget shows your beliefs. So you can talk all you want, but when you actually give money to increase training, to increase police, to change the system, which all costs money, right? To everything I said as far as the leagues and everything else, that's how you show your commitment. And it's going to take time. I mean, the training piece is a big piece, is a revolutionary piece. It's about de-escalation. It's about not seeing people as thugs, about seeing people as who they are and the relationship that they have to the community, as mothers, as brothers, as students, and as people who have lives and have rights, right? And the mayor always stresses that you should feel safe in your community, that you shouldn't feel like you are under siege, and that we are committed to making sure everyone feels that way. It's going to take time. And we're committed to the time it's going to take.
And what are you doing now as we go through the summer? Any new initiatives we should know about?
Well, right now, I started to talk about our police community program in terms of the neighborhood officer program, right? It's rolling into 40 precincts now. It's going to continue to expand. And that's something that you're going to see more of, more police officers who are, we used to call beat cops, who have enhanced training and really, as I said, are integral or really going to be into the fabric of the community. You're going to see a lot more of that this summer. And we looked, and that's going to roll into every precinct in the
And
next couple of years.
there was another shift too, the piece, because one of the problems was these untrained or new officers were put into higher crime areas. They weren't integrated into the community. They weren't connected with the community. And now there's more stability in terms of people will be seeing regular officers that they can come to know and vice versa.
You're going to see the same officers every day, right? So you're going to know Officer Williams, Officer O'Hara, Officer, Jeffries.
But in that, with that regard comes the mental health conversation, right?
Yeah.
Which I believe is a big conversation. This is what I'm told, I don't know, and you guys can speak to this. I'm told there's one mental health screening that a police officer gets when they get on the job. Is that correct?
All right, traditionally through the applicant process, they go to what's referred to as a psychological. That psychological breaks down into two components. You have a written component that's something like 1,100 questions, and then you have the oral component that follows. The oral component questions what the candidate fills out.
But it only happens one time.
Well, yes and no. It happens as a condition of employment. However, if that officer's involved or he or she engages in an incident that the department feels it's necessary to reevaluate them, then something similar will happen again.
I have to assume, because I know people who live in the hood, and I feel like
it's deficient. It's deficient.
Because
and
if you live in a violent,
we're
going to talk about that
because
that's a
Dr.
big issue.
Elisa, it's a huge issue.
All right,
we're going to talk about that later on in the program.
And then also talk to me, Marco, about, and also you, officer, about the quotas. Like, we're hearing this audio that came out today.
I'm sorry.
We had this audio that came out today, and we've known about it. I mean, if you live in New York City and you're black or brown, you always feel like people are picking on you and they're trying to reach some sort of ticket quota, even with parking, right? But now we have audio that supports that idea, where they're isolating certain demographics and going after people who are potential criminals because they get more pop, I think the term was. Is that a real thing?
The quotas are absolute in the police department.
And why?
Anyone that believes, because for one, it's a revenue generator. Secondly, this is the way that police commanders quantitate an officer's activity. How can I assess and evaluate the productiveness of this particular officer? It's a problem. I think it's a criminal issue, and it needs to be stopped. However, for decades upon decades,
deny that. The NYPD will deny that.
Decades upon decades,
denied
whether it's Police Commissioner Kelly, Bratton, Safer, etc., they've been consistent when pushing these quotas. Just case in point, how many times we have something we refer to as the mayor's management report. At the end of every year, they give you a statistical breakdown in what the police department produces. Elected officials are the people that are the driving force behind this, because whoever the mayor is, whoever that elected official is, they want to stand on a building and say that I have produced a level of productivity in this police department.
Okay, I hate to do this. We have to bring it. We want to bring in our colleagues from other stations, from WBLS, from WLIB, and also from Hot 97. We're going to get them situated. If you gentlemen would like to stay on for the next segment while we talk with them, we'll take some phone calls too. You're more than welcome to do that as we talk about this. All right, let's take a phone call while we get our next guest seated. Let's go to Alicia from the Bronx. Alicia?
Why is there so much confusion when it comes to Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter? Is it because there is a hidden agenda to secretly desensitize us to the value of human life? And they're using the least appreciated people on the planet, which has been proven, which is the black people, to do that. What is the agenda for? Who's behind it? And why?
Alicia, I mean, I can answer that quickly. That is called white supremacy and racism in America. And the fact that black people, anytime black people want to step up and say, hey, we're going to uplift ourselves, oftentimes white people, who are the majority of the population, say, well, what about us? Why are you trying to separate yourself? That's just white privilege and white supremacy, and that's a completely different discussion outside of talking about police brutality. And one thing I want to make sure in this discussion today is that we don't just bundle all of the issues into one conversation, right? We have police brutality issues, we have police in the community issues, we have racism issues in America, we have joblessness issues and unemployment issues. We have a lot of issues that we have to isolate. Let's not try to simplify. Anyone that goes, and this is the start of the conversation, anyone that has an issue with Black Lives Matter, the only way they can have an issue with it is either they don't understand what black people have gone through in this country and the history of black people and police in this country, which goes back hundreds of years, or their white privilege is just so crazy that they can't set it aside for a second and watch the most oppressed people in this country try to uplift themselves. That's the only answer I could come to.
All right, and we're taking your phone calls at 1-800-223-9797. This is One Voice, a special broadcast of WBLS Hot 97 WLIB, talking about the issues involved with police and the African American community and our city and country as a whole, because we are all in this together. And also you can tweet us at Hot 97, at Lisa Evers, at Old Man Ebro, hashtag One Voice.
You're on your game, Lisa. You are on your game right now. Like, you are on your game. Sorry, I had to lighten the mood a little bit.
Thank you, definitely. And of course, your phone call is 1-800-223-9797. Let's bring in our colleagues, because they've been sitting there, I'm watching their faces, and they want to join us. We have
Miss Ann Tripp,
yes,
from WBLS, who has been a part of our community here in New York City for a long time, talking about these issues and dealing with them on the front lines. We have
a trailblazer as a female reporter and journalist.
Yes,
I have
absolutely.
to say.
And we have Mr. Bob Slade, who also has been on the front lines here and having these conversations for many years in this city, dealing with everything that we've gone through. So you've seen it all. And then we have my colleague Rosenberg from Ebro in the Morning and ESPN's own Rosenberg.
Thank you.
That's right.
And beneficiary of white privilege my entire life.
There you go.
And retired NYPD Lieutenant Darren Porcher is going to stay with us for this next segment, and so is our Community Affairs Unit Commissioner Marco Carrion.
And I got to say, Marco, came here. We were attempting to get other people from City Hall. Marco stepped in to represent, and we appreciate you staying, because I know you only really had 10 minutes in the beginning, and we're already 20 minutes into this convo.
No,
so
we appreciate you making time for us.
What about
Bob Slade? How about talking about the climate that you sense? You've been covering these issues. I remember you schooling me as I was starting to report about what's going on in the community, these issues, and in a lot of ways, does it seem to you it's the same thing over and over again?
Yeah, I feel like I'm going back to the future. I mean, it's crazy. The police commissioner gave some stats. He talked about the African American recruits. What, 12%? That's all you can find? What is that? I mean, Asians are outnumbering African Americans on the force. What's going on? This is crazy. And I think I'm going to take you back 49 years to a movie. I'm going to repeat a line from a movie called, I'm a movie buff too, so from Cool Hand Luke. What we got here is a failure to communicate. What's happening here is you see one situation, police are talking about one thing, and the community is talking about something else. When I was growing up in the village of Harlem, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, we knew the police officer's name. Officer Wingate, Mr. Allen, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Smith, Officer Smith. We knew their names. They knew us. They knew our parents. So if we got into trouble, they just knew where to go. You don't have that anymore. We haven't had that in years.
But we're getting back to that, according to what Commissioner
Carrion. I don't know about that.
You don't look too. You don't have faith in this.
No,
Mr. Slade.
because they have to look. I saw a breakdown, in the 70s. That's when it really started falling apart. I'll give you a classic example. You call 911 and ask for an ambulance. This happened to me. I can only talk about personal stuff.
Flav made a record. 911's a joke.
That's right.
Yeah, right. Call 911. Guess who comes up? Not the ambulance guys, but the cops. They come up, their hands on their guns. In my mom's house, these jokers come up with their hands on their guns. I said, I'm sick. I'm having an asthma attack, and you guys are coming up. You're not helping me. Get out of here. And they chased them away. And they weren't cops of color.
And you started to see that in the 70s.
I saw that in the 70s.
Well, let's talk about 2016 in terms of these cops getting to know. Ann Tripp, you've seen it. We've seen with the street crimes unit going back to Amadou Diallo. We look at 2016. What's happening now? Where they are changing. They're bringing in police officers who are assigned to specific precincts, instead of just bringing these units in the vans that come through the community, don't know what the community, don't know the cultures, of the community. What do you think about that?
I think people are now speaking out because you have the head of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson,
right,
who says he's been profiled. You have the President of the United States saying that he was profiled. You have people on that level saying that they have experienced this. You've never had that before. You've never had African Americans in the position, the head of Homeland Security, say, oh yeah, I know what that's about. That's happened to me.
So you see some light in that.
I see some hope but not immediately. You were talking about the psychological briefly, and you had the new police officers, 12%, 30% Hispanic, and 90% Asian, or whatever it is. But the point is, you have to get the apple before it falls off the tree.
Right.
It's clearly, Officer Peter Liang, what test did he take? Okay, I'm afraid to go down the stairs in a project at night with a gun, but I'm not trying to be a police officer. So what did he pass? Who said, oh,
but he was one of those units, so what did they call that there? Those units that went in, the high impact, that would go in, that were straight out of the academy. They put them in without any training in terms of the community relations. Now that has been changed. They're no longer doing that. They're being paired with sergeants and with other officers who are more experienced, who know the neighborhood and put on permanent assignments, from what I have seen.
Who may have the same inclination. We're talking about the inclination, how people are seen, how they see our children. Anytime a police officer in Cleveland can shoot a 12-year-old child to death who's playing with a gun, and then report that he shot a 20-year-old. That was his call. I shot a 20-year-old man.
And that speaks to the psychological issue of white supremacy in America and how black people have been characterized in America since this thing was founded. Like we have, at the heart of America, we have a racial issue. We have had to deal with how our government and the people who founded this government, I've been saying this probably for the last 3 days now that this is kind of like an open dialogue and people can hear it. Our country had to reconcile how they can say all men are created equal and then enslave people at the same time. And they did it by making black people animals and property, 3/5 of a man. Yes. And then they had to market it to the rest of the people who are also humans so that they would then wrap their brain around this concept. And this has been going on for hundreds of years in this country. The characterization, especially for black men, that they're aggressive.
But Ebro, you're going to have, granted, but you're going to have people that say, but we have a black president. There are no more limits. There's no limits to what a black man can achieve.
And we still have police killing black boys on camera with no repercussions.
But is it, Darren Porcher, just a race issue, or is this an issue of blue trumps black and white?
Well, I think it's far more complicated than that. Ebro, what you're saying, it does make a lot of sense. And that does fall in the equation. But it goes back to that cultural piece within the police department. Police officers, in many instances, feel a sense of superiority. And to give you an example, when I refer to how officers refer to people as thugs and things to that effect, if I walk into, let's say, a forest, and I step on a roach, I discount it as this was something that was beneath me. That's the way officers perceive the public in these urban neighborhoods. Now, granted, do you have I want to say you have a lot of officers. No, hear me out. I was getting to that, Lisa. Okay. You do have a lot of officers that want to do the right thing, but they've been engulfed by the culture in policing. And a lot of times they just don't want to say anything. They feel afraid because that socialization within the police subculture, it trumps people so heavily that oftentimes they'll say things on the outside.
And they don't want to be picked on. They don't want to be isolated.
They want to assimilate to what that culture is. And you have a few outliers that are willing to make these statements. And when they do make these types of statements, they're deemed as pariahs, outcasts.
Well, I think now, Rosenberg, you had a conversation on the air last week.
Which got a lot of attention.
Right, and you basically went at an officer who was trying to mince his words after we saw a man selling CDs who clearly didn't have a gun get killed on camera, right? And just us, or you in this case, trying to figure out, hey, officer, do you see anything wrong here? Do you see a problem? He couldn't even come to terms with, yes, those officers made a mistake and speak out and say, I saw an error on camera. Officers won't even call each other out. But it seems like since your conversation this morning, we had a conversation where officers were calling.
Which was great.
Having a little bit more open dialogue. What do you experience?
Yeah, well, I have noticed, I've seen, people have been sending me a lot of videos since then of officers attempting to do so. One viral video that went around was one cop literally almost fist fighting another cop over picking on someone because of what they looked like. But the bottom line is it's still...
That's an aberration.
That's an aberration. It's few and far between. And the problem is it requires such bravery to do that.
Like, that shouldn't be brave.
It shouldn't be. You shouldn't expect someone who's trying to feed their family to have to fight against the entire force and risk all these things to do that. The thing that I've noticed, and I can only contribute the conversation from what I observe, because honestly, my experience is so vastly different than black Americans, is that you were speaking about the way, the superiority complex that officers have. And what
The
that
culture.
Culturally. And what that triggered in my mind was, not to me. I've never felt that. Because I'm white. I do not feel fear of police officers.
Your experiences
ever.
are going to be very different than an African American.
It
But
is.
that's what he's saying.
It's inherent. It's inherent. Black people feel an inherent fear that something bad can happen. First of all, white people don't have to fear anywhere.
Let me ask you a question.
We don't have to fear.
Let me ask you a question.
We don't. Not only do we not fear officers, because we know that if officers did anything, I would have so many lawyers. I would have they could never even. It would never happen. Not only do we not fear that, we don't fear going to dangerous neighborhoods. Because guess what? White people don't get hurt in those neighborhoods because people don't ever hurt white people because of the repercussions.
Have you ever been stopped by the police?
Have you
ever been stopped by the police?
Yes, I've been stopped.
Okay.
But I mean, for something I did wrong. Like I was stopped once going like 90 because I was going home to like see a Tyson pay-per-view or something. Cop pulled me over. I literally explained, sorry, I'm going nearly double the speed limit because I'm going to see a fight. The cop was like, oh man, I got to see that fight.
The average white person is not being stopped.
I don't think I got a ticket.
In addition to that, we look at marijuana possession here in the city of New York, for example.
Which they're changing.
Police Commissioner Bratton, according to him, things are going great. That the police department is doing these wonderful things to conjoin with the community. However,
No, to
if you're an African American,
decriminalize
but
offenses.
listen, if you're an African American, you are 10 times more susceptible to being stopped if you're in possession of marijuana than a Caucasian. And Caucasians carry marijuana just as much, if not more, than African Americans.
You're just basing it on your white friends.
Tell me.
I know.
I'm not looking.
Okay, let's take some. Can we take some phone calls because we have a lot of people that have been calling in on the line. This is One Voice, a special broadcast. Hot 97 WBLS WLIB taking your phone calls at 1-800-223-9797. Hashtag One Voice at Lisa Evers, at Old Man Ebro, at Rosenberg Radio, at everywhere else.
Just
hashtag it.
Search the hashtag One Voice.
You'll find it all out. Okay, let's go to Tracy from the Bronx right now and see what her question is.
Actually, I was listening to Commissioner Bratton. He's saying that the recruitment for black officers is fine. It's not true. These young black officers are being disqualified because they may have smoked marijuana back when they were in college. I believe the white children have did the same thing. They may have had arrests, whether it was a false arrest or whether it was true. And they're being given records. So this time now, when it comes down to obtaining a job of employment with NYPD, they're automatically disqualified. And it's not fair. So yes, you have these young white kids that's getting ready to come into these black communities scared to death because this is what they're being taught. So they're going to shoot to kill first and ask questions later.
Thank you, Tracy. Really quick, though, but that speaks to, and that's very good, Tracy, and we talked about this earlier, and then we can go to Marco. The quotas. The audio I heard that the Daily News put on SoundCloud specifically had the lieutenant grilling this officer.
And the commanding officer.
Grilling this officer.
Allegedly.
About
no, they're clearly there. You can hear them on this.
They're shaking down. This officer's being shook down for not stopping enough black and Latinos, which gets you into the system. You get your summons. I'm 16. You gave me a summons. I didn't get the mail, the thing to go to court. Now I got a warrant. Now you're stopping me for the warrant. Now I'm arrested. Now, boom. It's on my record that fast, right? In the course of a year.
It's
now
called
I'm 17.
policing for profit. That's
right. Right, but that is the essence of what we're talking about with these police officers getting disqualified, with the frustration of feeling picked on. These quotas, this is a real problem. It's a real problem.
It's a criminal issue.
The quotas is something that keeps going around and around again. But while we have the commissioner here, can we just talk about the recruiting for a minute?
If he'll talk about quotas.
Okay. Do you want to make a quick comment on the quotas?
I mean, I guess. Listen,
I want to ask you about the recruiting because that speaks to the future.
I mean, I'll say a couple of things. I can't speak to that particular case, right? All I know is that the mayor and the commissioner have come out strongly against the quotas, right? I mean, in any situation, you'll have, as they say, bad apples, right? And the commissioner has been very clear, right, that he's going to root out bad cops, racists, people who are bigoted, very clear, internally and externally. On the recruitment side, I mean, your caller is right. We have had a problem, right? But it speaks to our past, right? In the past of ticketing, arresting people for low-level offenses, which is why the mayor has instituted these reforms to stop arresting people for low-level offenses and instead write them tickets.
Because in 5 years from now, six, 7 years from now, when those individuals want to be on the force or apply, that stuff won't be on their record.
Exactly. Right?
Or any record, or any job they want to go for, they won't be criminalized.
I mean, everything we're doing, right, has to be comprehensive. It just can't be, let me work on recruitment, but not worry about what happened 5 years ago to this particular, this particular guy who got a summons for whatever, open container or whatever it was. As far as the recruitment goes, I mean, we work hard with all the fraternal organizations, and this is part of my job now, through our Young Male Initiative, work with all grassroots organizations, community-based organizations to really find people who want to become police officers, right? And really, and to the commissioner's point, I mean, one big thing he brought up was people actually living here in the city, to get people who come from the city, who live in the city, not people who have the experiences of growing up in Marcy houses, Linden houses, Johnson projects, right, who really know what people go through and then go back and give to their area. So, I mean, we have to, let me just finish this. I mean, I hear what you're saying, right? But any profession has like a culture of the profession. And it takes strong leadership to change that culture, right? To make sure people...
de Blasio ran on that platform of changing that. He's been in there over 2 years.
700,000.
Darren, the legacy of stop and frisk, which the
700,000 stop and frisk now going to be
year.
Now going to 700,000 stop and frisk. These are brown and black men.
Numbers have come down significantly.
Under 20,000 this year. Under 20,000. I mean, that's a cultural significance.
That's a huge shift.
But
May I just make this point because and to what you're saying, the stop and frisk, the police department and the mayor have admitted, they said that the number of black recruits, which the point Bob brought up, the number of black recruits coming into the police department was much lower than the black population of the city of New York, which is almost a third. So it was lower, they thought, because so many of them were turned off to policing because of the experiences they had had with those hundreds of thousands of unwarranted stops and frisks. And that's why one of the reasons why they have reduced that.
And the numbers are still low. But you know what the elephant in the room here is? Interesting. Who was the architect of stop and frisk? It was Police Commissioner Bratton under the Giuliani administration back in the 90s. So now de Blasio in turn brings him in as the fix-it. That's like having the wolf manage the hen
Darren,
house.
they weren't doing it to the extent, not to 750,000 men a year.
I was a cop under the Giuliani administration, and they were hardliners when it came to the quantitative statistics. That's where we got this CompStat program from, the Giuliani administration, under the direction of Police Commissioner Bill Bratton. The only reason why this changed was because of the lawsuit, Floyd versus the city of New York, when federal Judge Sinlin stated that a disproportionately higher number of African Americans and Latinos were being stopped and frisked here in the city.
Which we was one of the first. We were one of the first broadcast outlets, WBLS, WLIB, and Hot 97, to talk about that when it first became apparent.
You guys did a great job at exposing.
The feds had to shake it down.
We have so vilified.
But this is the previous administration. I mean, the mayor ran on severely reducing stop and frisk, 97% down. Now, we can sit here in this studio, right, in the safety of the studio and say that doesn't matter, right? But if you're one of those 97% of the black male population who's not getting tossed against the wall now, it does matter, right? And I appreciate, these anecdotes that come from the 70s or come from the Giuliani administration, what we're talking about now.
And we're not just talking about 2016, we're talking about 2017, 2018, 2019.
And I appreciate this conversation. When Brother Ebro started this, he talked about solutions moving forward. Right? Listen, no one can argue the brutal past of this country. And the mayor has been very vocal about that. And I would argue more vocal than any municipal leader in this country. Right? Someone who has said that having a black son and daughter, he has to think about all the time.
And we're going to talk about that.
The police were very upset about that.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. They didn't like the fact that he did that because his son is being told.
That's the cultural piece that I'm talking about.
Exactly.
And so you got
the unions.
I think what I'm hearing is obviously frustration from the past, and I appreciate you us moving forward. But we can't ignore the past.
No,
we cannot ignore the past.
All those police officers are not dead. They're not on the
we can't change it. Hold on a second. But we can't change the past We can only change the present,
That's
and we
right.
can only change the future. We're taking your telephone calls at 1-800-223-9797. This is One Voice, a special. I'm calling it a Trimulcast. Three stations. You like that?
I like
Trimulcast?
that. That was good.
A special
Well done.
Trimulcast.
Well played.
Gotta lighten it up. You know, I'm
Well
taking a
played.
cue
Well
from you, my
played.
brother.
Well played.
Hot 97, WBLS, WLIB, and you can hit us up using the hashtag OneVoice on Twitter and on social media. We're taking your comments, and just real quick, this is from Hard Earned TV. Real quick, Commissioner, before we let you go, because I know you got things to do in the city and running the community affairs. How do we make laws equal? Are there any new initiatives? I don't mean to throw a big one at you like that as you're walking out the door, but how do we make the any efforts in terms of the equal application of laws? Do you think people are perceiving, that the inequality? A lot of people perceive that there's different systems of justice. How do we change that?
Listen, obviously, in a big part, perception is reality. People feel this is still some folks in the system, right? And I would say, especially a lot of people, black and brown community feel that this is still an unjust system. And it's our responsibility, in this administration to make people feel that this is, equality. I mean, the mayor always talks about equality, and it's not only, wages, and it's not only where people get to live, but it's also the enforcement of the law. So this is our commitment. I mean, this is our charge. This is why people put us in office, and, we'll stay committed to the time we have.
Real changes underway.
Real change.
Well, we know the mayor wants real changes. He comes on the show all the time. Believe me, at our show, we are believers in the mayor's vision. What I'm not necessarily a believer of is that he's going to get support from the police to do that. And I just want to say, I was sitting on the side when Ebro asked that question to Commissioner Brad, and I just want to say, bravo, that man skates like Sidney Crosby, because he did not answer that question whatsoever.
In the police department.
All right, everything is great in the show right now at One Voice. We have to keep it moving here, so I want to thank Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Marco Carrion from the Community Assistance Unit with
Thank
the
you.
City of New York for being with us. Thank you so
Shout
much
out
for
to
being with
City Hall,
us.
too, man.
Shout out to
Stepping
City
up.
Hall, to
Appreciate
everybody.
that, guys.
Marty, who
Appreciate
worked so diligently getting emails all through the night to make it happen, so thank you so much. And Dr. Darren Porcher, thank you so much for being with us, former NYPD lieutenant.
Hanging out for a minute, or you skating
really
out? You can hang out.
I thought y'all were putting
You want me to hang out? Okay.
Marco's
Let's
got to
bring
go.
in-
He's got some stuff to do.
Okay, let's bring in, thank you, Marco.
Okay,
Let's
no
bring in
problem.
some of our other guests, because the questions and comments are coming in. Let's bring in Dr. Elisa English, clinical therapist with a specialty in social work, and our very own Bishop Hezekiah Walker here. And let's start talking about some solutions and how we're just handling the heavy news that's out there too.
Listen,
Are you ready to do that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think, for us to reset and get ready to have this spiritual and mental health conversation, to start, working on progress. I think it's important, once again, that we kind of, for the people watching and the world paying attention right now, for the size of New York City and the amount of people here and the many, many, many problems that we've had in the past, the fact that the commissioner would come on and even have a dialogue, to me, speaks volumes, but I would have obviously liked to get some more time with him, because I do believe that the attitude of police officers in the city is kind of a top-down thing, right?
Right.
Like and I think that's in the organization. I think that de Blasio makes himself available, and we've delved in deep with him. So I think we're making some steps, right? We're making some strides. Much better than many cities in the country from what I'm seeing on the news. I don't live there, but it doesn't seem to me that they are making the strides that we're making in a city like New York
No,
City.
I think we are making strides. There's clearly problems and there's clearly issues. But one of the things I think is important for us to talk about, and that we've all talked about a lot of times, just on our own in the conversation, is the heavy news. You see what happened in Minnesota with Philando Castile. Here's a man who was stopped 52 times. He was the cafeteria manager in a school, a man who's so gentle and so loved. He knew the kids, the little kids' special foods and the things that they had.
Did he have a record? He didn't have a record.
No record. Raised by two.
He had a gun permit, no record, and he had been stopped 52 times.
Right, but when people saw, Dr. Lisa English, I want to ask you about this as a clinical therapist, because this is something we've been having discussions with, I'm sure everybody, with their friends and with their family members. You wake up to the morning to that Facebook video that his girlfriend took, and you see the horror of, here is this man, law-abiding citizen, being stopped for no reason, no apparent reason, except maybe a taillight is what we always hear that. And then he's shot and killed there for no apparent reason. For people to wake up to that and deal with that coming after what happened in Louisiana to Alton Sterling, it's very heavy and hard for people to handle.
Absolutely. It absolutely increases and escalates trauma. So we're living in a trauma-ridden kind of environment right now, and the fact that you have police brutality, you have people who are being victimized by people that are here to serve and protect them, it does leave a person feeling like, what am I to do? How do I cope? How do I manage this? And it also, in many ways, brings them back to experiences in their life where they need to figure out healthy and unhealthy ways to cope with trauma. Trauma is not an easy thing to fix. We've all been there. And to try to figure out, and then every day or every other day you turn on the news, you see an officer killing an innocent person or a child or a woman. You've wondered to yourself, am I safe? And when any community feels unsafe, that is a horrible feeling. And I want to also say, when police officers, whether they're trained through the psychological exam or the psychiatric exam, which I think it should actually be the psychiatric exam, particularly because the psychiatric exam will measure mood and personality and emotion, and you can rule in and out whether or not someone has a history of ACE, adverse childhood experiences, which in many ways impacts how you respond to manage problems and stress in your life. And it also helps to determine what will it take for your anxiety to escalate to the point that you may.
What is a trigger factor?
Right.
Let me just bring in Bishop Hezekiah Walker. Your new video is called Better.
Yes.
There are a lot of people who believe and want to believe that it's going to get better. We have evidence that it is, but obviously then these incidents happen like Louisiana, like Minnesota, like Dallas, the attack on the police officers. And it shakes people's faith. Like a lot of people feel very unsettled right now. What do you say to them? How can people have any kind of faith right now?
Well, I think it starts within our community. I think I heard Ebro talk about the hood. And I think from the spiritual point, we've been trying to put the word neighbor back into the hood. Yeah. Because the word neighbor makes you accountable to your neighbor. From a spiritual perspective, of course, we're taught through the scriptures to love thy neighbor as thyself. And so if we were held accountable to that, then I think a lot of things would not happen into our community. I think one of the problems that I have is trying to get our community, our culture to respect each other. Because if we don't respect each other, how can we expect for the police officer or any other ethnic background to respect us? And I think our job is first, the scriptures talks about, and again, I hate to keep bringing up the Bible, but that's who I am. But the Bible talks about.
You're the bishop. Come on.
I'm the bishop. So the Bible talks
the
about.
Bible. It's good.
The Bible talks about charity begins at home and then it spreads abroad. I think when we adopted that mindset of hood, and again, I have no problem with it because I understand it. But when we took neighbor out, I think psychologically and even in the inner, man, I think we took that piece out.
The human piece.
The humanity.
And the human piece is missing.
The humanity. And it's not just from outsiders, it's also from people within the community.
From within the community.
Who are afraid of our youth.
We are afraid of our youth. We're afraid to live there. I stay in the community to help people to understand that you can become and still live there. But again, I must say that there are times when I am afraid of my own people.
Well,
Bishop,
let me just say,
let
me jump in there because once again, yes, we have our problems in our neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Yes, we have our problems, family structure. Yes, we have problems with self-love and loving one another inside. But when someone is given a badge and a gun to protect and uphold the law, that is a separate conversation that we should be fearful of our lives from them. They should be, in some regard, like I feel like an officer should be better. Right. Because you're an officer, you wear a uniform.
You're representing the government.
You're not a regular, everyday guy.
And that's exactly how young people see them. That's how we all view them.
That's how they want to be viewed.
They are an authoritative figure. So for me, it's more about consistency in their practices, in their procedures, in their policy, okay? Across the board, across cultures, across race. Consistency. People appreciate consistency. Collaboration. People should continue to have these kinds of dialogues that speak to the issues in a very important and a structured way so we can have this back and forth exchange. And important to have caring. It's easy to show a community that you care. Why? You help the little old lady across the street, right? You help a young child across the street. I mean, those are the things that we expect from the police
But I
department
think-
that we don't necessarily see.
But why are we caring? This is important also. First of all, we haven't mentioned the black officers who have been murdered by their white colleagues. Okay, there have been many of them as well, and you know
Right.
that. All right, so it's a race is very, very important here, and we have a tradition, but unfortunately, it's the wrong tradition. You know, so we have to think about that. We have to think about why people are really angry. The big ball of wax is when we see a ne'er-do-well like George Zimmerman rather, when we see people on camera murdering people, and then the Justice Department says, okay, we're going to open a civil rights investigation, but there's no bill, there's no indictment. Why? Because the threshold to get someone on civil rights violations is so high that the police officer would practically have to go to work in a white sheet and a dunce hat. Okay? Because that's the only way they're going to say, I think I can get us. Now, that's not the Justice Department's fault. That's the law.
Right.
How is the law changed? We vote for legislators.
That's right. Okay,
but
let's
if
talk
you
about
arrest
vote.
my children
Right.
when they're young and you criminalize them, and after a while they have a felony, they can't vote. You see?
Right.
So you can't vote to change the legislature, and you can't bring the burden of proof for civil rights cases down because we're not voting, and those of us will.
Look, we're running. I'm up against the clock.
Okay,
and
we'll
we're up
be all right,
against the
Lisa.
clock.
We'll be. I got. Lisa, I got.
He said, I got this. Huh?
We'll be
We'll be
all
all
right.
right?
We'll be all right.
We'll
We'll be all
Okay.
right.
All right.
Okay. No, let me just add one point and to back up what Mr. Hezekiah was saying. We have lost that sense of community. I keep talking, I harping on this all the time, just jumping on it left and right. There was a time when the next door neighbor knew you.
That's right.
And would tell your mommy and daddy that you did something wrong, and you'll get a whooping when you got home. That is gone. You don't even know the next door neighbor. You don't even know, you don't even want to talk to the next door neighbor. That's crazy. Also, and brother, former police officer can talk about this. I hate to see the man from the NYPD, I mean from the city leave, but we've been talking about this forever. Other communities are allowed to patrol those communities. We know the bad guys better than the cops do. We can tell you about them, but we're not allowed to do that. Other communities are allowed to patrol their communities.
That's right.
And they get away with it. When we asked to do that, it said no. And we send these police officers, the jokers from out of the city, don't know anything about the people, don't even care about the people, and nothing gets done. Nothing gets done.
I think I think that we all agree that the police officers don't respect our community. But do we agree that, respect deserves respect? If we don't respect our community, how can we expect?
Listen,
the police
Bishop,
officers
I
to
agree
respect?
with you wholeheartedly. I'm not trying to get around that conversation. What I'm going to not allow us to ever get away from is that tax-paying citizens pay these individuals salary. They have a uniform, a badge, and a gun. That is a separate conversation from our issues as black people. We have issues as black people that we need to deal with in our home. We have to deal with that. But thinking and knowing that the person who supposedly works for us could kill us is a separate conversation. I can't, now I understand, yes, if we upheld ourselves a little bit better, we held our sons and nephews accountable for selling drugs on the corner or joining a gang. Mom and dad was in the home. Let's just start there. Dad was in the home checking the young man. Mom and dad were still together. Like, we can go all the way down that road. But while we go down that road, we also have to understand why these police officers put on a badge, a gun, and a uniform and get away with killing us or even intimidating us and making us feel like we might get murdered.
The double system of justice. That many people
I'm saying,
perceive.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying we got to be able to do both at the same time.
I agree, because I'm not disagreeing with you that there is not racism in our police department, and it does not affect our community. I am in total agreement with you as far as that.
And I'll take it a step further. I think what you're saying is we need to take responsibility for the things we can control.
Exactly.
Because there's a lot that's out of our control.
Exactly.
So I'm with you on that.
I think for me, as a preacher in the community, the bigger picture is our community. And if we can take care of our community and grab a hold to our neighborhood, and then we can attack that.
And on that note, we are going to say thank you to everyone who has been tuning in to WBLS Hot 97 WLIB. This is One Voice. I'm Lisa Evers, co-host Ebro from Hot 97's morning
I got
show.
co-host?
And we've got a well,
Hey, get used to it.
my
you know.
host,
I
my
know what it's
brother,
like.
my brother, my longtime friend, and We're going to continue this discussion online, but we want to thank you so very much for participating in. The whole idea of this was to really bring people together, to try and get some ideas out there, and to try and understand whatever community, whatever race, whatever ethnicity you are, we are all here in New York City together.
Yes, we
dealing
are.
with the whole thing.
And if you're watching this conversation wherever you are in America or wherever you are around the globe, and your community leaders, media people are not having this type of dialogue, the mayor, the clergy, it's not happening, make it happen. Because this is a very important dialogue and it needs to be had open and in the public.
And if our guests can stay with us, we're going to continue this for a little while. We'll continue this discussion online. And because I think there's another piece I wanted to bring up too, was, and I'm sure you're sensitive to this as well, is with these shootings that have happened, especially after the Tamir Rice, there were a lot of parents of black boys who were saying to them, who were very nervous about them, things that little boys usually do, like play with guns. You cannot play with the gun.
Nope.
Mothers terrified with their children saying, I teach them to comply and you can still die. I teach them to be polite, to avoid this block or this corner because that's where the guys are hanging out.
I mean, it's basically like you can't even be a
like,
mischievous kid without actually thinking that your life is in danger.
But what about the fear for parents?
That's right. Kelly Rowland said that when she found out she was carrying a boy, she cried.
Yeah, that's true.
Kelly Rowland from Destiny's Child. Because she was happy that she was having a child, but she was afraid because she was having a boy.
That's right.
Now, then she's a star. That child will not grow up in the ghetto.
Right.
Okay.
So that child is not.
We're going to continue this conversation online, yes?
Yes, we are going to continue the conversation online. Hashtag is One Voice. And I wanted to bring that up with Dr. Elisa English, in terms of the fear that parents have, how do you deal with it? And then also, too, like the case in Minnesota, it's like kids see this, even if you try to protect your children from seeing these stories on TV, how do you tell them, like, how do you make that child not feel vulnerable, and how do you deal with the fear as a parent?
All parents will fear when there's some danger, and they're going to do what it takes to protect their children. I think an important part of that is keeping them away from all of this, overwhelming them with all this information. Maybe they don't need to have all of this information. It's too much overkill. If you expose children over and over to trauma and violence, small children,
7, 8, 9 years old.
yeah, even younger than that, 4 or 5. If you're constantly overloading them with all sorts of trauma and violence, there's ways that we need to work with our children.
And at Hot 97, where we frequently on Ebro in the Morning have conversations about the content and the music,
right?
The video games, right? The things that are going on online that kids are just watching, the fights that they watch. So join us online right now, hot97.com. WBLS 107.5, you can join us there. And also, what is LIB's? It's on WLIB.com. Join us there right now. We're going to continue this conversation. And thanks for everyone joining us. We are attempting to have one voice as a community here in New York City.
Yes, we are, and open up the conversation. We want to thank the police commissioner. We want to thank Mayor de Blasio's office, the Community Affairs Unit Commissioner Marco Carrion, and all of our team. I mean, such an amazing team to put this all together so quickly to try to respond to what everyone's doing. But to come back to the come back to the issue with the parents.
Let them jump out.
Okay.
Now we continue on.
All right, we can
I think
keep going.
we had to get out of radio.
Okay.
Are we out of radio?
No.
We're online now.
Got it. That's what I was waiting for. You guys are telling us that we're out. Now we're online.
We're online.
So now I can wild out. All right.
So what was that cue that was on there?
It's a different conversation than what we had on the
What? What was that cue that was on there? I was going by that cue. They told me. Okay, we'll keep going. We're still online. Okay, well now you're seeing behind the scenes, so this is, we're keeping it 100. But in terms of, to all of you, it's like the news, and we're in the news, and we deal with the news, and we live with the news, and it seems that there's two things happening. It's like with our children, we're looking at children, particularly children of color, are now looked at as suspects automatically in some cases. And also in terms of protecting our children, this idea of keeping their childhood, giving them some kind of childhood where they're not dealing with these heavy issues that we don't even have the answers to. What about that?
Well, it's always been that way. It hasn't changed. And racism isn't going to go away. Understand that. I mean, when I was a kid growing up in the village of Harlem, yeah, we were all suspects. That's nothing new. I mean, it's time to advance the conversation into what are we going to do about it? And, I mean, we, as the people, we've got to do something about it.
So, Mr. Slade, what you're saying, because I was conditioned this way by my father. My father said, because you're a black man and you're a big black man, you're gonna have to act differently than everyone else.
Yep, my daddy told me the same thing.
That was the conversation.
Yep.
There was no, is it fair? Is it not? It ain't fair.
Nope.
And act accordingly. That was what the conversation is.
And black girls were taught, don't go downtown with rollers in your hair and looking all bad because they're going to think that you're stealing something, whatever.
Right.
Make sure you comb your hair and look nice because you're always judged as a shoplifter or something.
Right,
You're
exactly.
followed around the store.
And so here we are today, still having this same conversation.
Yeah.
But you know, black and brown children can't even just be children. And that's a reality, and I don't know, Doctor.
That's what I was trying to say. You said it
you
much
can't
better.
even just, you
Kids
know, if
can't
I'm a
be kids.
mischievous kid in the suburbs, I don't
Right.
have to worry about dying
Right.
or getting a charge, right? But if I'm a mischievous kid and I live in the city, or I live in a neighborhood that is riddled with crime because of poverty and unemployment and all those other factors, I'm not even able to just be a kid.
Absolutely. It takes the normal out of the normal, right? So parents are dealing with all of these issues and there's no sense of normalcy. And so they're trying to find their way in terms of what do I train my children to do? How do I train them to protect themselves when they're not with me, you know, when they're going off to school? How do I do that in a way that doesn't further harm them? So it is a slippery slope. It is a process that we've been going generations upon generations of trying to provide information that we think helps to protect our children. I think we need to provide them with that sense of normalcy. And the only way we can do that is as a community, as a family.
As a neighborhood.
As a neighborhood.
Bishop was saying.
So that they feel supported.
That they feel
Some kids have gotten better. I do remember when you had little white school children and maybe one of their friends died from whatever, she may be hit by a car. They used to send psychologists and psychiatrists into the school to talk to the children. They didn't do that, I noticed, when little black children had friends and who died. Now I do see them sending in mental health
Trauma, what they call trauma
to the
teams,
kids
right.
in black schools as well.
Right, yeah, and they absolutely are using trauma teams. We also have what they call mental health first aid, which is another enormous push in the legislature in order to help basic practitioners, people, teachers and lawyers and doctors, so that they can engage children right there on the spot around these issues and move them right into another direction. Because again, I'm trying to explain to you guys, as much as this is a crisis and we're trying to manage and challenge it and to address it and fix it so that we can have a vision for tomorrow, children cannot be overloaded with this kind of information. Why? Because they internalize it as something that they cannot manage. They become fearful. They develop childhood anxiety. And next thing you know, they're experiencing what we call ACE, adverse childhood experiences. And the higher the ACE, the worse possibility of the chance that they'll have a bad outcome as they grow up.
I guess I was conditioned that it was, this is my life.
Yeah, and that's
right. So I may have ACE.
Yes.
We don't know.
Sure.
But luckily I haven't. I don't have any charges, and when I get pulled over, there's nothing on the sheet, and everything is good.
And the license is current.
Brake lights is going, and we good. But you know, what I'm hearing, and I guess what I want to do as a parent is prepare young people for the reality and stop double talking it. And stop waiting, you know, because I hear you talk, Mr. Slade, often, and we've had plenty of conversations over the years. It feels today that, you know, it sounds like we're accepting racism, and we're accepting white supremacy, and we're accepting the fabric of this country as that's just what it is. And I don't know. You know, I mean, I love seeing the young people protest. You know, my knee's bad, it starts hurting, so, you know, I get out there I've gotten out there a couple times, but, you know, is that protesting working? It doesn't feel like it is, because it's the same. It's necessary, but is it working?
No, it is, and I'll tell you why.
We
talked about the Black Lives Matter movement.
Right.
And I mentioned earlier that I had some issues with several components of the movement, in that I feel that the organizational structure is flawed. I think that they have a good purpose, the ideology is sound, however, they're doing a poor job in marshaling it in. And if they can do that, the movement would be sound. And you know what I kind of see Black Lives Matter as reflective of? Martin Luther King. back in the 60s.
Of course.
It's the same thing.
Of course.
But just going back to in terms of this thing with the racism, protesting, does it change things? Yes, it does. Because your voice is heard. It's now become a national narrative.
That's right.
Whereas we're talking about it. So you better believe that people are talking about this all over the place. Not just in the United States, but across the globe. I just saw something recently. One of these countries in the Caribbean, they put out
Bahamas.
Bahamas,
That's
a
right.
travel advisory
For
that
black men.
If you're an African American man and you're coming to the United States,
If you're a Bahamian man planning to come to New
watch
York,
your
be
back
careful.
when you come here,
Yeah,
because
that's
this is what it is. So what that tells me is the message is getting out. We need to talk about this more and more and more, and gradually we can revolutionize as a culture. So in no way, shape, or form take this as, look, we're just screaming and jumping up and down, and there's no execution on the back end. It's something that's coming.
But what's happening, what's different now
Yes.
is that you see more white folks
That's exactly what I was saying. That's
out there
important.
picketing and
Yes.
taking part
No,
in it.
I agree with
That
it.
is important.
That's the big part that's different. And by the way, when the Southern Christian Leadership Conference was doing its thing, you had people in government calling them instigators and calling them a racist organization.
Who's this? Black Lives Matter.
No, I was referring to the
During
Southern.
the 60s.
Back in the
Yes.
days, in the civil rights.
Right.
movement.
The NAACP.
They were called communists.
Communists, the whole thing.
The
That's what they call it. That's
NAACP
what they call it.
started out
Black Lives
with
Matter.
Caucasians.
No different. That's what they call it. What I want to go to, we're talking about advancing this. I want to know why the NYPD is so opposed of black and browns monitoring their own communities. What the devil's? What's going on
You
with
know,
that?
it's interesting, and you can clearly see the disconnect. You remember what Police Commissioner Bratton said last week when they posed the question to him as to how do you feel about Black Lives Matter? It's a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
It's a racist. Whereas you had the mayor that stated, look, he understands the narrative is necessary to be introduced on a national level. I blame Mayor de Blasio for this because he appoints the police commissioner. He can fire him tonight if he wants to. He chooses to accept him making these outward statements. But
And that sounds like business as usual, because when we go back to the 60s, right, they're saying the same things about the movements then. So it's business as usual, and they're running the same play to condition the mainstream public to look at these young people who are speaking up for things that are
As
atrocities.
Vicious people who are looking to overthrow this, that, and the other, and it's a bunch of crap.
The difference
But I
is
think the
now
thing
the
is-
police are getting hurt.
Yes.
Their feelings are hurt. As Rosenberg said, when he sees a white
physically
police
hurt.
officer, he sees a friend. He sees someone on his side. When these white officers see all these white people, I mean a sea of white people in these Black Lives Matter demonstrations, they feel betrayed. They look at them and they go, wait a minute, that looks like my nephew. That looks like my niece.
It is your
Why
nephew.
why are they against what we're doing? Because we're doing it for them. They don't really understand. And that's why they've been talking about we have no support in the community, and they've been whining about that. It's because there are so many white children and Asian children and Latin children who are in this. And they have a Toronto Black Lives Matter group as well.
The reason why the police department feels like they don't have support in the community because they haven't taken the 2 steps forward to engage the community.
point.
That's why they feel like
That's
it's
exactly
not
what I was
That's
going to
what
say.
I
But
said.
also collaborate.
I agree. One at a time.
Well, that's when I was saying when I talked about back in the day and knowing the police officers, you don't know these men and women from it. You don't know them. Who are they? And they don't know you, and they don't really want to know you. As a matter of fact, they want to get the hell out of there and go to another assignment, so they have to be in that area.
Absolutely.
You know that.
Or
Come
get
on.
overtime while they're in there on the
Oh,
backs
yeah.
of that community.
Come on. You know it.
But also you have to look at the number of lives. This is what the administration will say, what the police department will say, is that look at over the last decade how many
We've
more
saved the community.
No, how
Right?
many more people are alive because violent crime and murders. The murder rate is so much lower. What do you say to that? Shouldn't they be thanked for that?
Well,
I'm sorry.
For
I'm
doing
sorry.
or are you saying that's?
I just think that when we look at I think that's a byproduct.
I'm throwing out what they would say if somebody
I
was
think that's
here.
a byproduct of over-policing in the communities of color. When you look at these
To lower the
enormous-
murder rate?
No. When you look at the enormous, and it goes back to the quantitative statistics and locking up all of these people, does the end justify the means? I think that we can lower the crime rate if we had more engagement between police and
talk to
community.
each other.
And I'll tell you why. Because if the police are properly and effectively engaged in the community and dialogue, people from the community will call up the police
But they're
before
trying
the
to.
homicide.
They're trying to
before
do
the
that.
homicide is
They're
investigated.
trying to do that. The body cameras, the whole
Right,
body
but
camera
it goes
thing.
back to when you asked about how the crime rate was lowered and was the community a benefactor. I just think that it can be done in a different way.
But they will
because
say-
the people in the community will call if you have that dialogue. They will call you up and say, John Smith has an AK-47 in his apartment, or there's 2 kilos of cocaine in apartment 3C.
Yes, indeed.
That's proactive policing. That's not reactive policing. Sorry.
But on that, we have another issue, which is the culture of this not snitching.
Right.
Yes.
Right?
Snitches get
and,
stitches.
And snitches get
Get
stitches.
stitches.
And basically, your neighborhood terrorists who are treating their own neighbors, right? And scaring them into not communicating with the police so that they could do whatever dirt it is that they want to do.
You know why that's in play? Because the police department doesn't effectively protect that information. If people felt comfortable that I can present police with this information and no one else will know about it, you'd have far more people that give the information. These communities are under siege. They need police protection.
Yes.
However, the police protection must be 100%. They need to effectively deal with these communities, and when they get this information, the police, the person that made the complaint, this information doesn't get out there. You know, if you
Or they
wanna,
don't
if
have
you
the,
wanna,
they don't have the detectives knocking on
right,
their
right,
doors,
exactly.
so everybody
You
sees
don't
them
roll
coming
up
in.
to someone's house with a blue and white if you're trying to get the information.
Right.
You prearrange a meet place
Someplace
with this
else.
person somewhere else.
Right.
Hey, look, I got this information. I can meet up with you here. Okay, we'll sit down. We'll chop it up, and this is what it is. And no consistent. You know, I've seen so many times that great information sources have been missed because of this. My personal experience. So when we go to the stop snitching piece, people wouldn't even know who gave the information, so the snitch factor wouldn't even come into play.
We still haven't gotten to the question, the answer to the question I asked earlier.
Which is why won't they allow black and brown people to police officers?
Thank you. We haven't gotten that. Now, you
Who
know why.
won't allow them?
You
I
don't
don't
come
know.
on.
Who
You
won't allow them?
police
There's 10 in
officers.
those communities.
You know why.
What are you talking
Our
about?
Jewish
We
brothers
don't
and
have
sisters.
a Sham
they
Rim.
have those-
It's
Right.
called the Sham Rim. We don't
Yeah,
have a
we
Sham
don't have
Rim.
that. We want that, but they tell us no.
But who's
you
been
can't.
trying to tell me who? I'll go interview them right now.
Oh,
Who's been-
yeah, go to Bratton. Ask him why not.
No, but who is who is
The
stopping any
department,
community
the
from
police
doing
department. They say no. They shut that down. No, you can't have that.
No, what happens?
that? You have tenant organizations. You have community organizations.
community
Yeah,
boards.
a
You
bunch
have
of
some of
them.
the religious groups
Yes.
have patrols.
Yes, you have.
I
well, some
think-
of them.
Nobody's
well,
stopping
Mr.
them.
Slade,
I'm
I think
gonna
what you're
I'm gonna-
referring to is oftentimes like when we have the Shahram out in like Crown Heights and those places,
Right.
you have the city community that does police their own.
Right.
Many of those members have acquired gun permits.
Right.
And they're armed security forces.
Which is
and
part of a
that's what I'm
federal
referring to.
investigation right now.
So
Facts,
what I've
because
seen
they got
African
they
American
got those
Hashtag-
gun
right.
permits. They got those gun permits
Hashtag
slid under the
facts.
table from a favor that somebody paid someone else, and they got
And
that
that's
fast
not
track
coming
gun
to
permit.
light.
Allegedly,
That's
according
not
to a
coming to
federal
light.
And they
complaint.
recently beat up a gay black guy so badly that he lost sight in his left eye, and
Out
there
in
no
Brooklyn.
charges.
That happened out in Brooklyn.
That's
So,
right.
I think it's something that can be done in the African American
Yes, it can.
community. But what's going to have to happen is this: you're going to have people. You need people that are properly vetted, which is something that's possible. Because we have a lot of people in the African American community that don't have criminal records that would have the ability to acquire a gun permit. Now, if you assemble, and I think it would actually be a brilliant strategy for someone that has a business proposition, or if they're looking to erect a business plan, you can create one of these companies and charge, let's say, a minimum of maybe $5 a person a month in that community, and we can police our own communities. Which $5 a month is a low amount to pay for us to police our own communities. However, we need to engage the proper people to do it. We haven't had the proper people that have made this application in the past to police the communities, and that's what the issue is. So now we look at how do we conjoin the community leaders in these particular neighborhoods to arrange to assist in this process coming to fruition. It's something that can happen, but we just need the right people to sit down at the table.
Well, there's no trust between the NYPD and the community. So now you need to build trust. You need to build the collaborations. You need to coordinate these efforts. You need to have consistency. You need someone who will lead these efforts. I mean, all of it is important, but I think that we need to start somewhere. Those
Well,
are sort
I
of
think
like
we have a start
solutions.
here.
Right, this is the start.
This
but
venue
now
right
we need to
here
move
is a
from
start.
Well, let's.
Well,
why don't we go around the
was
panel? We
asking
just got a
about
few more minutes.
The bishop has a
I was
question.
asking about the police, the African American police officers that already work for the police department. Why couldn't they put those police officers in our community?
Well, I understand that
That's a good
oftentimes the
question.
dynamic is
They are.
geographic.
They are. I see a lot more.
And it's political.
I do it
because they don't want to fast track
But
it.
I'll tell you why it really happens. Oftentimes, whenever an officer leaves the police academy, they fill out what we refer to as a dream sheet. Most police officers want to work in an area that's geographically closer to their home. You have some officers that may want to work in your urban community, but believe it or not, a lot of African American officers don't want to work in these communities. And I know that may come as a shock, but it goes back to the implicit bias that was introduced in the earlier part of the discussion. I believe you mentioned that. You've been in situations where you don't want to be around your own. You have a lot of African Americans that don't want to work in East New York. They don't want to work in Brownsville because those are high crime neighborhoods. They would rather work in a place like Midtown. I'm not working as hard. So that's to answer your question. Why
So
you don't have...
So you're dancing around this issue of crime. You're dancing around this issue of crime and violence.
Well, the reason why I brought it up because, of course, you know, when you hire 12% of of African American people on the force, you can't, you know, put black cops into our neighborhood.
Yeah, statistically, you're not going to have the numbers to fill that, but the major issue is the geographical locations of where the officers live.
So question. Today, Commissioner Bratton said he swore in, was it 700, 600 new police?
12%.
Yeah.
12%.
But whatever the number was.
Okay.
How frequently does that happen?
Okay.
How often are new cops sworn in?
Traditionally, an academy cycle runs for 6 months. And then based on what the city's budget predicates, they'll either acquire more cops or not.
Okay, so it's
more of a
budgetary
budgeting
as
issue.
well
Right.
as the academy. So as we sit here today, and they're decriminalizing marijuana, and they're, you know, the broken windows policing and stop and frisk, and all of these things.
Quality of life.
They're making them, what are they?
They're called offenses.
Offenses.
So you can pay a ticket, but the catch is, if
gotta
you don't
pay
pay
the
the
ticket, you
ticket,
get the warrant, and
you
then
get a
you get
warrant,
denied,
and
blah,
you
blah,
can
blah.
still have a record.
Right. So,
if you don't
but
go
we're
to
trying to
jail.
quell the issue and bring down the issue of young black and
Excessive.
brown men getting
records
worked into the system, basically,
Right.
early. So that later on, this 16, 17, 18-year-old can become a police officer if they want. They can also vote. But that's going to take months and years for this process to continue on, yes?
It is going to take some time, but ultimately...
And you're shaking your head.
I'm just saying, there are churches in our community, and you know this, Bishop Pez, that routinely, maybe once every 2 months, have a
clean
judge
slate.
come in.
The
And
clean slate.
they say,
The clean,
bring
yes,
in-
I've heard of this.
Yeah, you've
Right.
been smoking marijuana, bring that in. I will dismiss that.
Right.
You-
Right.
You rode your bike on the sidewalk, bring
Ken
that
Thompson
in.
is
Ken Thompson came to us a couple of times.
And
Yeah.
Van
that
Stuyver-
And that's the
Cyrus
Brooklyn
Van
DA.
Stuyver too.
So, but where I'm going is,
is
we're having this conversation today. We've heard from the commissioner. We've heard from Marco from City Hall. The city's listening, and we're all over the internet right now. But a month from now, 6 months from now, Lisa, you have these conversations every week. Bob Slade, you have these conversations every week. We have them periodically on Ebro in the Morning on Hot 97. Obviously, Bishop, you're on the ground every day in the community, all over the world, dealing with these conversations. How can we monitor progress? What systems can we put in place to because this is a lot to manage, right? How can we monitor and communicate this progress so that it becomes habitual for us? Because that's what we need. This needs to be our lifestyle.
What you have to do, you have a voice. The 3 media outlets here have a tremendous voice here in the tri-state area. You need to, it's preferred if you can connect with public officials. When I say public officials, meaning people that can institute a level of policy. We don't have the ability sitting at this table to implement policy.
But when I have the mayor on, when Ken Thompson comes on.
But when you connect with people that are policymakers, that's how we can move forward with the execution. If you don't have a policymaker, it just becomes hot air. And how do we conjoin? And the question is, how are we able to effectively conjoin with policymakers? I think that because of the voice that you have the ability to sway votes. You can speak to one of these elected officials or people that are running for office and say, hey, look, I have the potential for you to engage millions of registered voters. This is what the policy is that we're looking for. You can connect with this voting bloc to get it done. When we look at the Hasidic Jewish community, they do it all the time. They may not do it on mainstream radio, but the key is connected with the policy.
All right, Dr. Lisa.
Okay, so this is a very macro level plan, and I get it. However, I strongly believe that there is so much power in community relations and people speaking to one another in the community that you can walk into your local precinct, know who your commanding officer is, have a conversation. I don't know, a group of churches, a group of concerned citizens, people who are advocating for stop the violence, push for peace, whatever it is. They can have those conversations. Implement some kind of strategy where it's coordinated. You can measure that. Maybe we can adopt 3 or 4 precincts to see if we can drive down these kinds of incidents. See what we can do together on the local level, and then that message can resonate across the country.
Level.
And it's also too, like,
is there a way, because I'm also
sick and tired of children coming to me, A, dying, that's one thing, but B, fearful, right? Suffering from anxiety and various mental health conditions that are very difficult to treat just by talking. So oftentimes we need to have a psychopharmacological intervention. Now you're putting them on medications just so that you can manage and stabilize their anxieties and fears. This is not the answer. You can't send them to the police to fix it. Right. You can't send them to me and Dr. whoever, because yes, we want them to be managed in the classroom, at home, when they're jumping off the table, when they're in my office pulling on my hair. Right, you know, we need to figure out right. So that's human, right? Yes. So we know our human potential is as good as our food quality and food potential. So yes, we need to have these conversations because we need to save the next generation.
So also I've noticed in a lot of these police brutality incidents that the officers that end up committing what I see on camera, in my opinion, is murder, we come to find out later that they've had several community complaints about their behavior. About their behavior.
There seem to have been what we would call warning signs.
Yes.
Right.
Or red flags.
As a regular Joe Blow person,
red flags.
Right? How can I find out who these officers are today on the police force who have these complaints on their resume?
You want to know what the monitoring's, all right. I don't know if the police department introduces that information to the public, but I will tell you it is in play. When I worked in the Internal Affairs Bureau, I had a list and I saw, quote unquote, who the offenders were. I don't know if this is public knowledge, but I think that it's worth the community asking that question and having that information.
Because I think in that case, now when there's someone with a series of complaints.
Because you can ask questions, you as a community can ask, why is this guy still on the street?
Well, what are we doing? Why is this guy still walking around with a gun and a badge? He's got 7 different complaints about racist and things that he's talking and things that he's done to people. Why is this guy still working?
Absolutely.
All right, well, I think that's going to have to be the
wrapping?
last. We had a lot of comments on social media from people asking about why we weren't talking about the guns and the drugs that were on the streets, why we were not talking about the gang culture, why we're not talking about images. These are all other topics that are very important for
this is an 8-hour
other
session.
programs.
And I think we have a chance to do something.
I mean, and for the audience, and for the audience in social media watching, what we wanted to do today, our mission today was to inform the public of the systems and the conversations that are already happening for us here in New York City. Because we don't know if these conversations are happening in Baton Rouge. We don't know if they're happening in Minnesota. We don't know if they're happening in Cleveland. We don't know if they're happening in Cincinnati. We don't know if they're happening in Atlanta. We don't know. But for us as media outlets that reside and people who reside in this area, we wanted the audience to know that we care about having that conversation here and about how it affects our community and our kids. So
and why we're having these conversations. We care about heroin on Staten Island because white kids are dying from heroin. And blacks were dying from heroin. And
nobody cares. And now
so
the opiate thing is blown out of control.
And that decay too.
So now we care about this, unfortunately, because 5 white Dallas cops were killed. And that is why we care. Because it would have just been 2 more black people killed.
I don't know. I think.
So why are we having this national?
Well, no, we was going to be here on Thursday before the Dallas
powder
I
cake.
think
That's what this is.
But I think the awareness has changed among all Americans, regardless of the race, about it, because of the video cameras, because of the video on the phones,
and Lisa,
they're actually seeing
it's also, and I said this before, I remember a time when this conversation for young people wasn't seen as cool. This is a cool conversation again.
Yeah.
This is something that people want to be knowledgeable about when they're 18, 19, 20 years old. That's a good sign.
That's awesome.
Right, that's a good sign that young people are like, no, I want to know what's going on. I want to understand how things work, and I want to participate.
By the way, it was on video.
Right.
And so many more young fathers getting involved in their children's lives and taking the role. But I think that has to be it. We're just about out of time.
Well, that's one quick point here about young folks, the millennials. I'm proud of them because a lot of them are smarter than I was when I was a kid. You too, you know it. What's happening now is they're not faked off into any old thing.
No.
Like, say, for example, when Philando Castillo is killed, the police department lets out that in 14 years he was driving, got stopped 52 times or whatever it is. They knew what that was all about.
Yep.
And what's
Or
it was to muddy this guy up.
Yep.
He deserved to be killed because he was a guilty man.
Yep.
He broke the law. We understand. Well, those kids knew that. They're not stupid.
Yep. So
they understand.
So we are making some incremental steps and some progress. So we'll continue to have this dialogue. We appreciate everybody.
We appreciate everybody being with us, and thanks for everybody
Thank you.
for watching. It was awesome.
Thank you very much.
Man, this is great, man.
Yeah, that's great.
I enjoyed this.
Yeah, it was good, right?
It was good. It was excellent. We got to do this.
No, totally. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great to see you.
Help my kids.
And it was great.
Let's take some.
Nice
Can we take a couple
to
pictures?
see you. Yeah.
Nicely done. Thank you.
Hey, Melissa, can I?